What's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Wake and Jake College Football Show. Today is the Week Zero recap, and my goodness, it felt so good to sit down on Saturday and just watch college football for most of the day. It wasn't an all-day thing. It wasn't back to back to back. There was only a handful of Power Four teams even playing, but regardless, it felt it felt right. It felt good, and I'm so excited for this season moving forward. So today, Week Zero recap. Now, week one, it does go from like Thursday night to Monday night. So we're going to kind of break down these previews for this weekend into over the course of 3 episodes. So today, week zero recap, but I'll also be previewing Thursday's games and Friday's games. I will be giving out some picks. Those aren't going to count against the record, but I'll give out some picks for those as well. And then later this week, I will preview Saturday and Sunday's games. And then Sunday, or I guess Monday when it comes out, I will then preview Monday's game as well. So a lot to unpack, a lot to get into this week. Week one is always a little hectic. Typically, are longer episodes because of spanning from Thursday to Monday. But yeah, that's what to expect today. So let's not waste any more time. Let's have a good wake and bake session. Get right into our week zero recap. All right, so before we get into the week zero recap, we do have some news to touch on. And typically the recap shows are not shows that we get into to any news just because the news is the college football games that were played and we're recapping those. But it did come out that next season the SEC is officially moving to 9 conference games. And I am so pumped for that. And I'm not there's a lot of Big Ten fans, Big 12 fans that are huge haters that the SEC doesn't play 9 conference games because it's not fair. And I get those arguments, and I don't necessarily disagree with them, but I am not. That is not my biggest reasoning for wanting a 9 conference game schedule for the SEC and also the ACC. By the way, can't forget about them. They're now the only conference that plays 8 conference games, so we need to now get them on board, which I'm sure at some point over the next 6 months, some sort of announcement is going to come out that they're either working on it or that it's happening. So that's just my thoughts. But when it comes to the SEC playing 9 conference games, the biggest reason I want them to do it, it's not to make everything fair, because honestly, I would love it if the Big Ten dropped down to 8. Why not? But you can't, because these conferences are so damn big that it's hard to get a read on some of these teams sometimes, because look at SMU and look at Indiana. Both, because these conferences are so big, both ended up with very easy schedules and deserved to make the playoffs. But if they had played in, a little bit of a harder conference schedule, they definitely would not have been in the playoffs. I firmly believe that. So I think when you have a 16, 17, 18 team conference, you have to adapt and you have to go to 9 conference games. Now, if we ever get back to 10, 11, 12 conference game schedules, or I should say conferences, sorry, not schedules, then sure, let's drop it down to 8 for everybody. I'm fully behind that, but we need smaller conferences before we can think about going back to 8 or going to 8 for the first time, even. Um, Conference realignment has just, I hate it so much. It sucks. And like I said, just making these conferences so big sometimes makes it hard to figure out who the really, really good teams are, because you get, not that Indiana and SMU weren't good, but you get teams in the playoffs that maybe should not have been in the playoffs if they didn't have one of the easiest schedules in the country. So I'm pumped that the SEC is moving to 9 conference games. So what's going to happen is they are going to get 3 permanent rivals, which I'm glad they're trying to preserve some of these rivalries. It's going to be interesting to see how they split that up, because there are some teams that you could argue have 4 that could be should be in rotation, and there's some teams that you're like maybe 1. Teams like Mizzou, who you could argue, I guess Arkansas would be their one that is a for sure thing, but then you're just trying to throw in 2 other random ones because they don't really have any rivals and they probably don't even belong in the SEC regionally. Now, the rest are going to be on rotation. So you have your 3 permanent every single year, which I love. But the rest are going to be on rotation. And so how it will work is that you will play a home and home with every single team in the SEC within a 4 year stretch, which finally, because it has been, I don't remember the exact date and how many years, but it's an absurd amount of years since Georgia has had to play at Texas A&M. And Texas A&M has been in the SEC for a while now, long enough that Georgia should have been there somewhat recently, but it's been a while since Georgia's had to go to Texas A&M. We can't have that. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I like that each team is going to be playing an official home and a home game, or home and away, or whatever, however you want to word it, every 4 years. So you will see every team at least twice every 4 years, and at each team's home stadium. So I like that a lot. Um, and then they do have to play one more P4 opponent, whether it's ACC, Notre Dame, Big Ten, Big 12. They do have to have another one of those opponents on the schedule. So that'll be interesting to see how they go about scheduling that. So basically, their schedule now is 10 Power Four games, and then two, you know, the Mercers or the Alabama A&Ms, Florida A&M. You know, all those schools get their shine of getting their asses beat by an SEC team every, twice a year. There's gonna be those two games a year now. So I'm excited. I'm happy they're going to 9. Won't start till next season, but that's okay. Now we just need the ACC to get on it. All right, week 0 recap. We're going to start with Farmageddon. We saved it for last when I did the preview. We're just going to start off the bat with it. Farmageddon. Iowa State 24, Kansas State 21, and wow, did this game start off ugly. So ugly. Now, don't get me wrong, even though it was ugly, I loved it. I loved every single second of it. So that's not me complaining. That is just how I would describe that game, or at least the start of it. A ton of drop passes. I think there was 2 fumbles for each team in the first half. Um, Granted, I know the weather was not great, so that obviously contributes. Plus, it's the first game of the season, and that's the theme, guys, for week 0 and week 1. Sloppiness, ugliness, just that sort of stuff. It is going to happen to nearly every team at every level in the first week of the season. It's just how many of those mistakes do you make, or how slow do you start off? It's going to happen with every team. It's just this, the beginning was so bad. So I have 3 big takeaways from this game. Number 1, both of these defenses might be pretty good. Everybody was shitting all over Kansas State and Iowa State's offense, especially in that first half. I don't even think it's necessarily that the offenses were that bad. I think the defenses might be that good, which leads into my second takeaway of, I think Kansas State's front 6 or 7, they might be pretty good. They might be really good this year. Now, we look, I understand they that Carson Hansen went off in the fourth quarter. So that is something that does need to be fixed. They were good for 3 quarters, especially that first half. But by that fourth quarter, they had just been beaten down. Carson Hansen was running all over them. It it was a tough scene after seeing those first 3 quarters. So their front 6 or 7 should be really good this year. They just got to figure out how to put it together for a full game. Um, Third takeaway, I said in my preview for Iowa State, I don't think people are going to realize just how important those 2 NFL wide receivers were to this offense. I think it's going to be a little bit of a shock to people who aren't directly related to the team. And I think after this first game, I still stand by that because the passing game was not explosive. Um, they were very much a run first team, and for at least the first half and part of the third quarter, could not get anything going on the ground. Towards the end of the third quarter, they started to pick it up a little more, and then that fourth quarter, they were rolling. Uh, it's gonna They're gonna miss those 2 wide receivers. Let's just put it that way. Now, the MVP of this game is Carson Hansen. I don't know what Iowa State was doing. It's almost like they were just saving him for the fourth quarter, because going into the fourth quarter, he had 6 carries for 12 yards. Not having a great game, also had only 6 carries. And then in that fourth quarter, he had 10 carries for 59 yards and then a reception for like 15 yards. Um, just it's like they were almost like, right, we're just going to unleash our secret weapon in the fourth quarter. Just bide our time. It was bizarre. Just granted, I think Kansas State's defense got beat down a little bit, got tired a little bit. It's first game of the season. But Carson Hansen went off in that fourth quarter. But the biggest overreaction though I have seen coming from this game, and I can't get behind it, so I am not going to overreact this. If anything, I'm overreacting on the other side. People seem to think that after one game into the season, on not the greatest field conditions, not the greatest weather, against a team who might have a pretty good defense, also not playing in either of the team's home stadiums, you are in Dublin, Ireland, so just add in all those factors. I can't get behind this take just yet. But everybody seems to think that Avery Johnson's absolute garbage. And I disagree. Um, could he have played better? Sure. Was it terrible or as bad as everybody seems to be making it out to be? Absolutely not. Now, you look at his stat line. His stat line is fantastic. 21 of 30, 273, two touchdowns, and then had 21 rushing yards and another touchdown. Stat line looks great. If you watched him play, you could argue it was a step down from what those stats show, but at the same time, it wasn't bad. I think people need to relax. It was one game, and again, not great field conditions, not great weather. You're in Ireland playing against a team that might actually have a pretty good defense this year, and you went 21 of 30 for 273 and two touchdowns. Relax, everybody. It was one game. Yes, they lost. Yes, he could have played better. I put no blame on him necessarily for why they lost this game. Kansas State shot themselves in the foot way too many times not just on offense but also on defense. It just too many self-inflicted wounds for them to win that game, and that's what happened. They lost. I also think losing Dylan Edwards that early into the game probably was not great for them because they did struggle to run the ball, and again, losing him basically immediately into the game didn't help at all either. Um, what also didn't help was Iowa State won this game. I had them losing this game. I said going into this game, I said in my Big 12 preview, I'm not necessarily high on Iowa State this year. I think they're going to end up outside the top 25. I think they're going to finish middle of the Big 12. Beating Kansas State week one is definitely not helping my prediction. Next, we had Fresno State at Kansas. And I mean, just talking about what I was predicting for a team not looking great now. My prediction for Kansas starting out 5-1 or 6-0. I think I like that prediction a lot more after watching this game. Now, granted, it also depends on how good Fresno State is. If they end up going throughout this year 4-8, I mean, this win is, I guess, technically less impressive, even though they did dominate. Kansas 31, by the way, Fresno State 7. Um, but if Fresno State ends up being like a 7-win team, 8-win team, this win looks a lot better, and I feel a lot better about Kansas starting 5-1 or 6-0. Maybe that's an overreaction just based off of one game, and that's fine. But I do feel a lot better about that prediction. It was absolute domination, basically from start to finish. Jaden Daniels put on an absolute clinic. 18 to 20, 176, three touchdowns, and then added nearly another 50 yards on the ground. Running back room looked solid. It wasn't Devin Neal, but it still looked solid. And defense absolutely flying around. Fresno State's quarterback EJ Warner started at Temple, transferred to Rice, now at Fresno State, son of Hall of Famer Kurt Warner. He started the game, so his first drive and then a little bit of the second drive, 5 of 5, 81 yards, and I thought, oh no, this is going to be a shootout. Kansas better be rolling on offense if they want to win this game. Because 5 of 5 for 81 yards, obviously you're not going to keep that up the whole game. Um, but it came out hot. And then he didn't keep that up the whole game. After the basically the rest of the game. So that was all in the first drive, 81 yards first drive, and a little bit of the second drive. The rest of the game had a little over 100 yards passing. Ended up with 2 interceptions, lost a fumble. It was brutal for EJ Warner. He was in a blender. Um, Outside that first drive, when they did score a touchdown, they did not do anything offensively after that for the most part. Again, I feel a lot better about Kansas going 5-1, 6-0 to start the season. Uh, I guess if Fresno ends up being an absolute trash team, then I take that back a little bit. Um, Kansas looked really good though. A huge key also to them going undefeated or 5-1. Jaden Daniels has to stay healthy. He took a few hits last night, which I didn't love based on his fragility. I don't even know if I said that word right. Uh, Makes me a little nervous though. But if he can stay healthy, Kansas is looking pretty good. And then to finish off the night, we had Stanford at Hawaii. Um, when I was previewing this game, I told you that this is one of the few spots on the schedule that Stanford has a shot to win, and that I didn't think this was a guarantee because Hawaii might be pretty good this year. Not like 8-4, 9-3 good, but 6-6, maybe 7-5, making a bowl game. I may have mentioned that the defense might actually be solid this year, and that's pretty much what happened. Stanford is in trouble. They really are. They got off to a good start. Hawaii got off to a terrible start. Stanford took like a 7.5 minute drive to start the game, marched right down the field, just running the ball right at Hawaii. Uh, couldn't capitalize, had to settle for a field goal, kicked it off to Hawaii. Hawaii ended up with it at the 1 yard line. Not the brightest move on their part, but it's the first game of the season. Mistakes happen. And then Hawaii is a run and shoot offense. They don't like to run the ball. And so, and I don't think they're equipped to be a power rushing team either, because again, they like to run and shoot. Backed up at your own 1 yard line, they decide to throw a pass. Redshirt freshman Micah Alahado, I'm probably butchered his last name there, does not get the throw off quickly, gets sacked, fumbles. Stanford ends up recovering the ball for a touchdown, and just like that, we're 7-8 minutes into the game. Hawaii has touched the ball for one play, and Stanford's up 10-3. Not ideal. Or 10-0. Did I say 10-3? 10-0. Absolutely crazy. Hawaii just terrible start to the game. But they did come back, ended up taking a 14-13 lead going into halftime. Stanford ended up taking a 20-17 lead late in the fourth quarter, and then I love this story. Hawaii's kicker is from Japan. He learned to kick by watching YouTube videos. He then came over to the U.S. for college, went to a small JUCO in the Midwest somewhere. I think it was Ohio. They said. Tried to go somewhere where he knew they didn't speak Japanese, so he could learn learn English. Uh, Asked for a tryout on the team, got it, made the team, was the kicker there for a few years, and now he's at Hawaii. Credit to this guy. Kicked a game-winning field goal with no time left. Ice in his veins, just nailed it. He was the MVP of that game. You could argue it could be the quarterback, Michael Eliado. But to kick 3 field goals, 1 to win the game, you learn to kick on YouTube. What a great story. Absolutely crazy. It's going to be a long year for Stanford. Like I mentioned, this is one of the few spots on the schedule that they actually had a chance to win this game. Um, but credit to Hawaii's defense, honestly. Outside of, I would say, 2 drives where they just got absolutely manhandled by the offensive line in the run game, they played pretty good. Late in the game, they did allow like a 85 yard drive that took like 10 minutes off the clock and was 20 plays long, and they just looked beat after that. And then Stanford ended up getting the ball back, and they started driving yet again. And Hawaii, I thought it was over for them, and then they pulled off a great interception, um, and ended up winning the game, 23-20. Ben Gulbranson, however you pronounce that name, for Stanford, their quarterback. If that's the best they got, they're in trouble this season. He went 15 of 30 for 109 yards and one interception against Hawaii. Yes, I know I said Hawaii's defense might actually be decent this year. You're a Power 4 team. You should not struggle that hard against a Group of 5 team. Stanford's defense might be fine, and I think their running game will be good enough. Quarterback play is going to be an issue this year. Again, first game, so this is slightly an overreaction because we don't know, but based on just that one game, that QB position looks bleak this year. And my biggest takeaway from this game is I think I was right to be high on Hawaii this year. So that's my week 0 recap. Not not a ton of crazy. Like I said, not a ton of games, not a lot of Power 4 teams playing. Only one Power 4 versus Power 4 matchup. It's still college football. College football is still back. I still loved every single second of it. So, like I mentioned earlier too, I will be previewing the Thursday night games and the Friday night games. I'm not going to get into every game, just a handful of them. So let's start with Thursday's games, and we'll go with Ohio at Rutgers. Rutgers is a 14.5 point favorite at home, and honestly, Ohio is not the easiest Group of 5 team to start with this season. I don't think that they're necessarily going to make the playoffs, so they're not that level of G5, but they're not an easy win per se, because they are a team that has a chance to win the MAC. They do bring back a ton of production on offense. They also bring in C.A. Bangera. I butchering his name. I know I am. He was on the Gophers last year. He was on Ohio's roster. Was a great player for them. Transferred to Minnesota for 1 year. Didn't see a lot of playing time at Minnesota. Transferred back to Ohio. So he is back with Ohio for his final season. Um, Offensive line is inexperienced, so that's going to be a question mark for them. But defensively, for them as well, they do have a very experienced secondary. So Rutgers is trying to throw the ball. They might struggle a little bit there, but the defensive line is inexperienced for Ohio, and Rutgers does bring back quite a bit of production on their offensive line. And as Gopher fans know, and anybody who's watched Eighth and Calic Madness, if you want to win the game and you want him to struggle, you need to put pressure on him. He does not do well under pressure. And with Rutgers' offensive line and Ohio's defensive line, I don't know how much pressure they will actually get on him. So it's possible that Ohio's offense keeps them close in this game, but I don't expect Ohio to win. Maybe cover, but not win. All right, Minnesota. Buffalo at Minnesota. Minnesota is an 18.5 point favorite. Now, similar to Rutgers and Ohio, Buffalo is not the easiest Group of 5 team to start the season off with either. They also have a very good shot at winning the MAC this year. Their defense should be real solid. They do bring back like 10 starters on the defensive side. That front 6 or 7 could provide problems or issues for an offensive line that is relatively new. Offensively, for Buffalo, they do bring back a good amount of production, but I think the offense, it if they hit on the quarterback position, this offense could be pretty good. If they don't, it all falls apart. They brought in Taquan Robertson this offseason. He's bounced around UConn. I believe he was at Kansas State. There might be a third one in there that I don't quite remember. Um, I'm not necessarily high on him as a quarterback. Maybe for a MAC team he's going to be decent, but going against a Power 4 team, I don't love it. So I do think that Minnesota does win this game. I mean, they're 18.5 point favorites, so obviously everybody thinks they're going to win. I do feel like 18.5 is a lot of points because we've seen it with the Gophers and PJ Fleck. First game of the season, again, for basically every other team too. You know, teams do start off a little slow. Things aren't quite clicking how you want them to click because you're still trying to figure out what works, what doesn't going against an actual team. So I think 18.5 is a lot of points, but I don't think it's going to be necessarily close. So I have Minnesota winning, but I think Buffalo covers. Now, that was my preview of Minnesota Buffalo. Now we're going to do a Minnesota Minute. So, season starts this Thursday against Buffalo. And I figure I already did, my Big 10 preview and I talked about Minnesota and that. But I just want to kind of go through my floor for the team, my ceiling, and my expectations. When you look at this schedule, you could argue, some people might argue there are six. I say there are seven. I don't like to use the word guarantee, but I can't think of a better one. Seven guaranteed wins on this schedule, in my opinion. So for Minnesota, my floor is 7-5. Now, most sports books will have Minnesota as a 6.5 on the over under for season win total or a win total. I think there's one that has them at 7.5 wins, but most have them at 6.5. I think their floor is the over, 7-5. Uh, Redshirt freshman quarterback. It's not going to be, it's not like he's not going to have the ups and downs because that's what happens with every freshman and redshirt freshman quarterback. Um, so I think 7-5 with what is around him and how good that defense could be and should be. I think the floor is 7-5. The ceiling is honestly, I don't think Minnesota has the toughest schedule this year. Um, if Nebraska's not that good defensively this year, if Iowa didn't hit on their quarterback yet again, they play Ohio State, they play Oregon. Those are not, I don't have them winning those games. Those are long shots to actually win. Every other game on the schedule is winnable for Minnesota. Now, whether or not they actually win is why I do have their floor at 7-5. But and a few ifs have to happen. Iowa has to whiff on the quarterback position yet again, like I mentioned, that sort of thing. So, but I have the ceiling at 10-2, and that is if, like I mentioned, if everything goes right, 10-2 is the ceiling. Where do I think they land? I think 8-4, 9-3 is where they land. I think they land somewhere in the middle, um, but I don't think they're worse than 7-5 this year. What are my expectations for this team? To make a bowl game, to win the bowl game. I'm not expecting them to make the playoffs or compete for a Big Ten title. Maybe next year, sure, but we'll talk about that then, depending on who leaves, who comes back, um, how good they play this year, what's Drake Lindsay like. I have my expectations for what could possibly happen next year, but this year, bowl game, top half of the Big Ten, and not just like going to the Detroit bowl game or whatever. A good destination bowl game, Nashville, or I guess Duke's Mayo Bowl wasn't terrible, but you get what I'm saying. A decent bowl game, top half of the Big Ten, have some good wins, have Drake Lindsay get comfortable, have a good running attack. I I don't know about the defense because I think the starters have the potential to be a top five defense in the Big Ten. What's behind them is where there's a lot of question marks. So if we can see some sort of development or hopefulness in the backups, I would like to see that as well. I don't have crazy expectations for Minnesota this year. I just want to go to a good bowl game. I want to finish top half of the Big Ten. 7-5 is the floor. 10-2 is the ceiling. I expect an 8-4 season, maybe 9-3. All right, that's my Minnesota minute. We won't uh, touch on them anymore. I promise, unless it's about a bet. We got Nebraska at Cincinnati. Cincinnati is a 6.5 point dog at home. Um, for Nebraska, I don't, like I mentioned with Minnesota, I don't like to use the word guarantee, but there are six guaranteed wins on this schedule for Nebraska. Which means if there are six guaranteed wins, there are six that you could argue are a coin flip or an automatic loss. If they can split those other six right down the middle, you're looking at a 9-3 team. And so that is where I have their ceiling because I don't think that they're necessarily going to have a winning record in those other six games. 500 sure, but not a winning record. So I have their ceiling at 9-3. Um, but again, with six guaranteed wins, that puts my floor for them at 6-6. Where do I expect them to land? I think they are a 7-5 team, possibly 8-4. But I don't see anything higher than 8, and I honestly I don't see anything lower than 7. It's one or the other for me this year. Uh, Last year, defense was the strength of this team. I think this year that flips, and the offense is the strength this year, especially with Dana Holgerson having a full offseason with Dylan Raiola. I don't love the front six or seven for Nebraska. I think they do 3-3-5. So front six for Nebraska. Uh, a lot of inexperience there. So I think that's going to be a big struggle this year, getting after the quarterback, stopping the run, that sort of thing. Secondary should be pretty solid. A lot of experience there. Um, but Dana Holgerson having a full offseason with the team, but then also Dylan Raiola is going to help a lot. Now, wide receiver room, running back room, they're very young. So still got to see some things from them. They did bring in a couple transfers though at the wide receiver position, which I do like, so that's a good plus. But the depth of the wide receiver room and the running back room is very young, so that they have a couple injuries, it could be rough. But I like Nebraska offensively this year. Defensively, I'm hesitant. Cincinnati, 5-7 team last year, and they lost five straight to end the season. It just wasn't great. Um, And honestly, I don't expect them to be much better than 5-7, if at all. Maybe a 6-6 team, 7-5 if everything hit perfect, but I don't expect much more than that. Um, Offense was the strength last year. They bring back Sorsby. They bring in a pretty decent running back room: Tawi Walker, Evan Pryor. I don't love their wide receivers though. So this is, and I'm not sure. Maybe they're high on them, but I think this is probably going to be a run first team with Walker and Pryor. Um, Wide receivers are a huge question, though. Defensively for Cincinnati, defensive line was a weak spot for them. A lot of injuries, faltered down as the season went on, lost five straight to end the year. Uh, Pass defense wasn't good either, but I do think, and I'm not sure how good the secondary is going to be either this year. I don't know if it's necessarily going to take that step forward, but I do think the defensive line will be better. And if the defensive line is better, it helps the secondary be better because they don't have to cover receivers for as long. Rising tide lifts all boats, but I still think that secondary might be an issue. Now, where I think Nebraska is going to shine on offense is where Cincinnati's weakest on defense, and vice versa. Where Cincinnati's going to thrive on offense is where I think Nebraska is going to be weakest on defense. So Cincinnati's going to try to run the ball, and they're going to try to take time off the clock, kind of do like what Stanford was trying to do to Hawaii, just dominate time of possession, wear them out running the ball, that sort of thing. And Nebraska is going to try to air it out and I guess technically score quickly because that's usually what happens with teams that air it out. I think Nebraska does win this one, but I do think the line of 6.5 is a good line. I do think it is just a one score game. Uh, Now, is it by 7 or less? That's where you got to run into that or try to make that decision because Cincinnati's a 6.5 point dog. Spoiler: I'm not touching that line. All right, Miami of Ohio at Wisconsin. Wisconsin is a 17.5 point favorite. Wisconsin's got one of the hardest schedules in all of college football this year. So this game and next week, I guess too, again, or the not next week, but the following week, I think when they play Middle Tennessee, I believe. Um, this game is probably the best we're going to see Wisconsin all year, which, as a Gopher fan, brings me joy. As a Wisconsin fan, it's got to be depressing. Um, because even if your team is better than last year, which I don't know how much better they technically will be, you still have an absolute gauntlet you have to go through. Now, Miami of Ohio. I would much rather start against them than Buffalo or Ohio. They do not bring a single starter back on offense. They did bring in DeQuan Finn from Baylor, who, if you remember, was an absolute stud at Toledo, tore up the MAC, transferred to Baylor, sucked at Baylor. Now he's at Miami of Ohio. So even though there's a lot of unknowns on the offensive side of the ball and they don't bring back any starters, having DeQuan Finn as your quarterback is a huge plus, and he will make plays happen. Um, but that's a lot of unknowns other than that. Defensively, they do bring back a ton from their secondary, but their defensive line is very young. I think Daquan Finn will make some plays. They'll score a little bit. I think, honestly, the over under on points for them, I think, is like 9.5. Uh, Goes to show you where Vegas puts this Miami of Ohio team. Um, but I think he makes some plays. They'll score a couple times, but I do think Wisconsin wins this one quite easily. And I'm not even high on Wisconsin necessarily this year, but I think they win this one relatively easily. Um, Might be closer than they'd like in the first half, but that's usually how first weeks go for a lot of teams. So those are the games that are being played Thursday that I thought probably will be the best games. Though it's not just these ones that are being played. There are other games being played. I just feel like these are the four most interesting in my opinion. Obviously, because I'm a Minnesota fan, but a few of these, Nebraska Cincinnati's a P4 P4 matchup. Um, Ohio at Rutgers is not going to be necessarily a blowout. It could be, but not guaranteed. But yeah, those are probably the best games in my opinion. Now, moving on to Friday, we'll start with Western Michigan and Michigan State. Michigan State is a 19.5 point favorite at home, and much like Miami of Ohio, I would much rather start with Western Michigan than Buffalo or Ohio. So uh, I do think Michigan State wins this one relatively easily. Whether it's by 19.5 or not, over or under that, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be necessarily close, though. Michigan State is a team that might surprise some people this year. Now, I have them going like 6-6, 7-5, right in that area. I think they went 5-7 last year. I do think they take a step forward this year, but I still think we're 1 year away from them really bursting onto the scene. Uh, Now, Aiden Childs did get a lot better last year as the season went on, so I expect him to hit the ground running this year and have a pretty decent season. The only problem is the weapons around him are very inexperienced, or they are transfers from like Group of Five schools, FCS schools, Division Two schools, which I'm not hating on them because they could still be very good. It's just that is quite the jump. You're not just jumping up to the Power Four level; you're jumping up to Power Two level. So that's quite the jump for a Group of Five FCS and Division Two players. Um, if they hit on a couple, this offense could be pretty decent. Because the defense wasn't terrible last year. They were just really bad at getting after the quarterback. I think it's possible that they make a bowl. Like I said, I have them going 6-6, 7-5. But it's hard to know exactly what this team's going to look like, as it is with a lot of teams, but just because of the inexperience in transfers. So it's a good thing that they're starting the season with Western Michigan because now we're going to kind of get an idea of what this team looks like, and I think it's a good team to kind of ease yourself into the season. And then also on Friday nights we've got Auburn at Baylor. Baylor is a 2.5 point dog at home. I said it in my Big 12 preview. Baylor does not really have an excuse to not be good this year, just with what they bring back. They should be in the running for the Big 12. They should be in the running for a playoff spot, and I have Baylor making playoffs. They bring back their top two wide receivers, their top two rushers, most of their offensive line, and most importantly, their quarterback. Defensively, they do bring back a handful. They weren't necessarily great last year defensively. They did bring in a few transfers to fill some holes. They don't have an excuse to not be good this year. For Auburn, though, this is a make or break year for Hugh Freeze. He is potentially on the hot seat, if not on the hot seat. They brought in Jackson Arnold at quarterback, brought in a handful of wide receivers, already had a couple studs on the roster. Running back room is a bit of an unknown. Not sure what to expect from them. Now, defensively, though, they should be solid again this year. They were pretty decent last year. I expect them to be good again this year. But offensively, Auburn's got to get it together, and it is make or break for Hugh Freeze. Now, rumor has it for this game that Auburn has three quarterbacks that they're going to play, and that they have three different play callers depending on what down it is. If that is true, Baylor by a million. If it's not true, then I still take Baylor to win, honestly. I think Auburn is good enough to be a top 25 team, but I think Baylor is good enough to make the playoffs. And then for the final game for Friday, Georgia Tech at Colorado. Colorado is a 3.5 point dog at home. And I mean, I say it all the time with Georgia Tech. If Haynes King plays, they have a chance to win. Uh, and offensively, for them, they do bring back uh, a ton of starters in production on that offensive side of the ball. I do like the transfers that they also brought in on offense. Defensively is where the biggest question is going to be because they were terrible at getting after the quarterback last year. Absolutely awful. So they got to be better at that this year. Now, this is going to be skewed, and we can't fully know if they're going to be good at getting after the quarterback with this game because one thing with the Deion Sanders Colorado team, they don't have good offensive lines ever. So if Colorado wants to have even a decent season this year, that offensive line has to be good for once. They have had terrible running game the last couple of years. Offensive line has been terrible. Both of those have to be better if Colorado wants to be good this year. Uh, so if we see Georgia Tech really get after whoever it is that's the starter, whether it's Julian Lewis or Caden Salter, if Georgia Tech really gets after the quarterback, we have to take it with a grain of salt because I don't think Colorado's offensive line is going to be very good this year. So it is gonna we can't overreact, even though we're going to. We cannot overreact to if Georgia Tech looks good at getting after the quarterback. But I have Georgia Tech winning this. Haynes King's playing. Georgia Tech's going to win. I'm not high on Colorado this year, and I am very high on Georgia Tech. So that is my Thursday and Friday previews. Later this week, I will get into Saturday and Sunday previews, uh, but I didn't want to push those too close to when those were being played. Um, week 0 picks. Let's get into the picks. Week 0, I went 2-1. They don't count against the record, but I did go 2-1. Um, a few picks. Again, these are not going to count towards the official record. A few picks that I do like though for Thursday and Friday games. Give me Ohio to cover 14.5. Give me Buffalo first half spread of plus 10.5. I will take Cincinnati and Nebraska under 53.5. And then give me Colorado under 24.5 team total. And then I'll take Baylor money line at plus 110. Again, these are not going to count against the record because I typically like to keep those two Saturday games only. But these are a few picks that I do like for Thursday and Friday. If you want a moneyline parlay as well, Minnesota, Baylor, Georgia Tech plus 239. I might sprinkle a little on that as well. Again, not going to count against the official record, but it is a parlay and some picks that I do like. But it is time for the final segment and my favorite segment. Dude, are you high? And I had a few nominations this week. Um, I thought about doing the refs from the Iowa State Kansas State game, but it's the first week for everybody, so I decided to be nice to the refs this week. I thought about doing whoever decided to paint the field at the Iowa State Kansas State game because had no idea what yard line they were on, where the hash marks were. It was brutal. The refs struggled, the viewers struggled. It was bad, but I decided to be nice because it's Dublin. They're not used to football, so we'll give them a break. Um, I really thought I was going to do Auburn claiming all these national titles from like the early 1900s, but I decided to skip on them. Stanford as well. They were up for this as Hawaii was driving the ball with a tie game 20-20 to try to get into field goal position or score a touchdown. They Hawaii ran one last play and was letting the clock run down, and they were gonna call a timeout with like 2-3 seconds left and try to kick the game winner. And Stanford had 2 or 3 timeouts left. I don't remember exactly how many, and decided not to call timeouts and let Hawaii run the ball down or the clock down to 3 and let them try to kick a field goal. Bizarre. but I decided not to do that either. Instead, this goes to Stanford's defensive lineman. Oh goodness, I think it was Gabe Parker was his name. I didn't actually write it down. He got a sack and decided to celebrate. And he goes to like midfield and just starts doing this dumb TikTok dance. And it wasn't just like a quick 1-2 done and run back to your side. No, it was a 1-2. Oh shit, he's still going. Oh, he's still going. And he's still going. And like the ref runs over and shoves him away, like, get out of here, and then throws the flag. Dude, are you high? You know, this is not the NFL, and this is not like a freshman either that was doing this. This was a guy in his, I think, sixth year of college football. He's been around. He's not he's not a newbie. You can't dance for that long and celebrate for that long and not expect a penalty. They called the penalty on him, and he's putting his hands on his head like, "Oh, what? I can't believe why? How did that happen?" Because you danced forever. You can't celebrate that much. This is not the NFL. This has been a rule forever. Dude, are you high? Just the dance just went on way too long. I was watching this like, when are they going to throw the flag? And then you finally see the ref come flying in to break it up. But week one, week zero, I should say, just from a handful of games, had a lot of nominees for Dude Are You High. So I can only imagine what week one is going to bring. I feel like I'm really going to have to filter some of these out and put in a lot of honorable mentions. But yeah, that is my week zero recap as well as my week one Thursday and Friday preview. I hope you all enjoyed. I will be back later this week to preview Saturdays and Sunday games.